What is up, wrestling fans? Welcome to another Pay-Per-Viewpoint edition of the Smark Out Moment Smack Talk podcast. This is the predictions for the Payback 2017 event that's going to be coming up this Sunday night. It's a Raw exclusive event. We got a couple of matches that have been announced already. Possibility that maybe they would announce one or two, but I highly doubt it at this point. Although that's going to be something that we need to talk about, in a minute or so, because it's really kind of confusing why one of these matches does not exist on the card. But nevertheless, what I'm going to be doing here is breaking down my opinions of what I think is going to be happening, any kind of spoilers that you should be factoring in, which if you don't want to know that stuff, then too bad, I'm going to say it anyway. And, all the other kind of good stuff that comes along with that kind of stuff. And who am I? Well, if you don't know, I am your host, as always, Tony Mango. And let's dive right into the thing that I was alluding to a little bit earlier of a match that is not on the card, at least as far as Wednesday afternoon when I'm recording this, which is about like 12:30 or so. And that is, we don't have an Intercontinental Championship match, which is kind of crazy because the feud that we've been seeing for the past couple of weeks has been Dean Ambrose and The Miz. And it hasn't been one of those feuds where it's sort of like, kind of like off and on, and they clearly are just sort of like wasting a little bit of time. Sort of like the thing like with Kurt Hawkins, and he had a match with Finn Balor. That's not a feud right now. The Miz and Dean Ambrose have been crossing paths for a consistent amount of time since this Superstar shakeup. So you would have thought that they would have had some kind of a match together. But instead, Dean Ambrose completely off the card, and instead The Miz is going to be having a MizTV segment with Finn Balor, who also doesn't have a match because they're waiting for him to do something with Bray Wyatt. Now, Bray Wyatt has a match with a SmackDown superstar with Randy Orton, and that's a confusing scenario too, and we had a whole big confusion thing with the United States Championship as well, but let's stick with this Miz talk right now. MizTV with Finn Balor is going to be one of those pre-show kickoff segments that I'm assuming if you go ahead and you watch it, then you're going to be disappointed that nothing happened in it, really. And if you skip it, you probably are not going to skip a damn thing that you really should have been watching, because what's the likelihood that this is going to turn out to be anything other than Miz gloats about himself, Finn Balor, who really is just like not all that great on the mic, says a couple of little words, and then there's some kind of a scuffle, and Finn Balor stands tall in the end. That's exactly what I'm imagining is going to be going down, and I can't imagine it being anything really other than that. The Miz isn't going to start a feud with Finn Balor when he's doing this whole thing with Dean Ambrose, and with Finn Balor doing anything with Bray Wyatt in the future. So really, this just seems like a waste to me. And I hate to be down on it, because I do like Finn Balor, and I think that The Miz is one of the best people that they have on the roster right now as far as like characters go and everything. But this seems like it's sort of just, we don't want to do one thing, we don't want to do another thing. What can we do to put these guys on the card, but not actually have to do anything? And that's the kind of lazy booking that it just bugs me, because you know what? If you're not going to be doing anything solid with The Miz and the Intercontinental Championship, and you don't have some other placement feud for Finn Balor to be working, why not put like Emma versus Dana Brooke on the card? Why not put some kind of a feud together with Mickie James and Sasha Banks? Or why not dedicate a little bit of time to Apollo Crews? That guy needs a push. I mean, he's not going to be somebody that they can just throw into the main event tomorrow, but you got to start building somewhere. And his whole thing with Titus O'Neil is not the most important thing in the world, and it's not the most interesting thing in the world, but at the same time, the pre-show is a spot that you can have a little bit of flexibility when it comes to that. And that might make a big difference when it comes to a guy like Apollo Crews. This isn't going to make much of a difference at all to The Miz or Finn Balor. Finn Balor's already in that upper mid-card sort of level, and if not flat-out main event at this point. The Miz is a tried and tested superstar. Apollo Crews needs a bump. And if you would have had him against Titus O'Neil, or if they're going to do some kind of a tag team gimmick together or something like that, or I don't know, like, there's a couple other ways that you could be having a little bit more out of what you're going to do with the pre-show. And the other pre-show match that we have announced is Luke Gallows and Karl Anderson versus Enzo Amore and Big Cass. And that is sort of along the lines of what I'm talking about. That's a feud that is not really all that important, but not having them on the card would make it seem like it was even less important, because then they wouldn't have been able to find the time, even on a pre-show, to put these guys on there. Now, don't forget, Gallows and Anderson just had the tag team championship, and they lost it to the Hardy Boys at WrestleMania. But they lost it, and then the night afterward, they lose their number one contenders rematch. And you know what? That's been kind of bugging me, because it seems like they sort of rushed that as if they didn't want to do it at all. Like, let's have the Hardy Boys beat Gallows and Anderson, and then they're going to beat them as soon as possible afterward, and then everybody can forget about it because those two teams aren't going to match up or something like that. And that's just weird, because Gallows and Anderson not only need the credibility behind them to be able to fight the Hardy Boys, but they are basically the top heels on the brand right now. So if you have the top heels and the top baby faces essentially by beating the top heels, really kind of weird that they went with that Cesaro and Sheamus thing. And that's going to tie into my predictions for the tag team championship match as well. So I might as well kind of just merge these together. But the tag team championship match, I think, needs to end with Cesaro and Sheamus turning heel. So if that's the case, that is interesting as well, because we've got the Revival is not really working anything right now because Dash Wilder is injured. When they come back, though, they're going to need some kind of a tag team to face. And Heath Slater and Rhino is really not all that interesting. Golden Truth, take it or leave it. I think it might be a mistake if we get Cesaro and Sheamus turn heel, but I think it's going to happen. And then that's going to kind of continue this whole Hardy Boys thing, and then maybe we're going to get another Cesaro and Sheamus versus Enzo and Cass thing down the line or something, but maybe I'm wrong about that. Maybe it's just going to be the Hardy Boys retain, and there is no heel turn or anything like that, but I do think that the Hardy Boys are going to retain regardless, because I think if a heel turn is going to happen, we're going to see the Hardy Boys retain, and then Cesaro and Sheamus turn heel. But the idea of Gallows and Anderson versus Enzo and Cass, to me, might have a factor, or might play a factor in who wins for that tag team championship match later on, too. Enzo and Cass didn't technically win the match that just happened on Monday Night Raw this week. That was Gallows and Anderson and Samoa Joe against Seth Rollins, Big Cass, and it was supposed to be Enzo Amore, but he got replaced because, they wanted to have Finn Balor do a match. Those babyfaces won. And usually when the babyfaces win on Raw, they end up losing on the pay-per-view and stuff. Not every time, but enough times that you can sort of lean towards betting that way. So my instinct is to say that Gallows and Anderson is going to be winning the match. And then a little bit later on in the night, the Hardy Boys win. That's kind of like that one babyface team wins, one babyface team loses, that sort of a thing. And then that Cesaro and Sheamus heel turn, I'm leaning more towards that happening too. But I'm not super excited about the Gallows and Anderson, Enzo and Cass match. I've seen it enough times by now that it's nothing all that special. And the same kind of thing with the Hardy Boys and Sheamus and Cesaro. Even though that is a fresher match, we had a Hardy against Sheamus, a Hardy against Cesaro, etc. So, those are going to basically be the matches that I care the least about on this card, are those two kickoff things, the two kickoff segments. One of them's not a match, it's just MizTV, and then the tag team title match. But then let's move on to the Cruiserweight Championship match. Enzo is not in the match. Why am I saying Enzo? Neville is going to be defending again against Austin Aries, and this is where I think that we're going to see a title change, because I thought that this was going to happen at WrestleMania, and obviously I was wrong. But you know what? Maybe the reason why they didn't have a title change at WrestleMania was because it was the first match of the pre-show, and they didn't want to have the Cruiserweight Championship change hands there, and they figured, you know what? Let's wait a little bit. Let's have this happen at Payback. It's only a couple of weeks away, and it'll be like a bigger story if we kind of do it around like a smaller pay-per-view or something, because it would have gotten lost in the shuffle at WrestleMania. Let's be honest. If we would have had an Austin Aries title win 2 hours later, nobody's going to really remember that he won that match, right? And you got Undertaker's retirement, you got the Brock Lesnar Goldberg situation, and by that point, you just killed off the whole Cruiserweight, King of the Cruiserweight thing being dethroned. If it happens at Payback, suddenly it becomes a bigger deal. So I think that that's going to happen here, and I think that that's got a potential to be one of, if not the best matches of the night, because there's a couple that I'm leaning towards sort of being... Well, let me put it this way. It's not that I don't have faith in it. It's that I don't have as much faith in it as I would have had I not seen some other matches. For the majority of some of the other ones that are coming up. One of those, of course, is Kevin Owens versus Chris Jericho for the United States Championship. And that match, I really want to be as good as I had imagined that it would be. Because I thought that their match at WrestleMania was going to be better than what it was, I have to admit. Their feud has been very interesting. Not as interesting now that the shakeup has split the two apart, but, you know, that's what happens when you do piss poor planning on that kind of stuff. But the match itself, I think, maybe this is going to be Jericho's last match for a little while, and maybe he's going to go balls to the wall crazy with it and try to steal the show. And they've got the potential to do that because Kevin Owens and Chris Jericho have had some really good matches in the past. They've got the in-ring talent to be able to pull it off, and I'm pretty sure that they're going to want to end this on a high note as opposed to just sort of, you know, lingering on a little bit and continuing far beyond the point where people give a shit anymore. But the confusion about the United States Championship itself is we know that Kevin Owens is on SmackDown. They've been saying if Chris Jericho wins, he goes to SmackDown as well because it's more of an issue of the United States Championship being property of SmackDown. Essentially, they just switched the Intercontinental and the United States. I know that the reason why they're saying this is because they want to put a little bit of flexibility in there and they want to try to get people to question whether or not Kevin Owens is going to retain, but it's a guarantee. Kevin Owens is going to retain here. They wouldn't be having him start this whole new face of America gimmick, and on top of that, if Jericho is leaving, why have him win a championship and then go over to another brand just to not show up anymore? It's not going to happen. And if Jericho does end up winning that match, he would have to wait until Backlash to face AJ Styles. So it's babyface versus babyface. And so there's a lot of different reasons why, and the feud that they've been setting up is Styles versus Kevin Owens. So all signs point to Kevin Owens retaining here, and you'd be a fool not to bet that he would retain here. The Raw Women's Championship match is more questionable. Bayley versus Alexa Bliss. That could go either way. Alexa Bliss is somebody who has proven herself far beyond what I think most people would have assumed that she would have been able to pull off when she moved over to SmackDown from NXT. And now she's essentially the top heel on Raw. So she got that hot shot right to the championship title picture. And her versus Bayley could end up being a really, really good match. That could actually be another one that may be the best match of the night. And I don't have a lot of faith that Alexa Bliss is going to win the match here, but I'm kind of rooting for her a little bit. And it's not just because I think she's super cute and everything, but I also think that there's money in Bayley versus Sasha Banks, but the way that they've been hinting at it and not pulling the trigger is making me not really be all that interested anymore. So with Nia Jax being the other case, I kind of would rather see Bayley versus Alexa Bliss and do that for maybe a month or two, that kind of a thing. Maybe Alexa wins the title here, and then she has this standard rematch thing with Bayley at, what's the next Raw pay-per-view? Extreme Rules. And then we can move on to Bayley versus Sasha Banks after that or something, and then Alexa Bliss can fight Mickie James for the championship, or, you know, whatever the case may be like that. But I do think Bayley is going to retain. I think that either Alexa Bliss is going to just flat out lose because she's the heel, or there's going to be some other kind of feud that starts up with maybe a Mickie James, maybe Sasha Banks, I don't know. So I would lean more towards Bayley winning the match just straight up, and Alexa Bliss coming out afterward, you know, Monday Night Raw, and just kind of being like, that's bullshit, I wasn't ready, that kind of a thing, you know. So what I mentioned about the Owens and Jericho feud not really matching up when it comes to the in-ring style as what I had hoped for, I kind of think the same thing's going to happen with Samoa Joe and Seth Rollins. And I hate to say it because I really like Samoa Joe, and I think that Seth Rollins has a ton of positives to him. And I think that this has, on paper, the potential to be such a good feud and such a good match. But I got a feeling that their styles are going to clash. And I hope that I'm wrong. I mean, of course, I want to be wrong about anything that I think is negative. Because why the hell would I want to be right about something like that? I'd rather be wrong and enjoy myself than to be right and be like, you see, that was a pain in the ass for 40 minutes, you know? So the Joe and Rollins thing has lost some steam for me, I have to admit. This whole idea of him fighting for Triple H's honor is kind of dumb, and it's kind of just like tacking on an extra sequel to something that you don't need. Sort of like a lot of different movie franchises do. You know, did we really need a Terminator 3? The story ended at Terminator 2, as far as I'm concerned. All the other stuff that came after that was garbage. Well, you know, the TV series is pretty good. Anyway, I went sidetracked. But that's what kind of happens a lot. We get, like, a movie is successful, and then they do, like, an offshoot, or you do a sequel, and they try to recapture some of the magic, but it's not quite the same. Seth Rollins got attacked by Samoa Joe, and it would have been this really interesting match at, I almost called that Payback, Fastlane, and they weren't able to do it because of Seth Rollins' injury. Then they do the Triple H thing. They ended up pulling that off pretty well, and then now they're just going back to the well, and it's like, okay, well, we're going to pick up where we left off, and hopefully it's good enough, and I don't think it's going to be, but there's a shot that it could be. I mean, they know what they're doing. They've been around long enough. So you got to just sort of witness it as it happens and see how it plans out. But I'm not going to be going into it with the biggest expectations in the world. So hopefully that will kind of offset it a little bit. And I'll be looking at this afterward and going, yeah, it was pretty good. Instead of going, oh, God damn it, this could have been a 5 pay-per-view feud that could have lasted forever and it sucks and I don't want them to do any more matches and all that kind of general bitching that I probably would do if that would be the case. But yeah, this on paper, this could have been that main match that I would have been the most excited for, and there's something in my gut that's telling me that I shouldn't really get my hopes up really all that high for it. Same kind of thing actually for the House of Horrors match. And there's even more confusion when it comes to that than there is anything else, because is it for the WWE Championship or is it not? It doesn't seem like it is anymore, yet why not? It's really kind of crazy. Is it because they were just adamantly wanted to start pushing this Jinder Mahal thing and they don't want to make anything too complicated? Or maybe it's because they want Bray Wyatt to get the win, but they don't want him to win the championship, because then we got a whole situation again with the United States Championship. And you know, if Jericho wins, he goes to SmackDown. If Wyatt wins, does that mean that he goes back to SmackDown? And then it was pointless for him to be on Raw. They didn't think out this superstar shakeup. That's what's obvious here. And that's why we're getting a SmackDown feud ending on the whole... Well, actually, we're getting 2 SmackDown feuds ending on a Raw-based pay-per-view, because it's the next closest one to round out everything and to get that out of the way. And then we can move on to other things for Backlash and for Extreme Rules and stuff like that. So, Randy Orton versus Bray Wyatt in this House of Horrors match, they still haven't specified exactly what that is either. All they've been saying is it's going to start in the House of Horrors and then end in the match. I'm tired when I'm doing this, by the way, everybody. It's going to end in the ring. And that, to me, is questionable. It seems like what they're going to do, this is just my speculation and context clues kind of leading to this sort of idea, but it seems like they're going to pre-tape the House of Horrors section, and then at some point in the end of the night or whatever, we're going to get the 2 of them brawl towards the ring, and then Randy Orton hits an RKO and he wins. That seems kind of lame a little bit to me. But maybe they've got some ideas that are going to pull that off where it'll be pretty interesting. I don't have a whole lot of interest in watching a pre-taped segment on a live pay-per-view. I think it's going to come out really manufactured, and that's one of the reasons why I never saw the Final Deletion. And I didn't really like that Wyatt family compound thing that they did with the New Day. That wasn't really all that great to me. So with Randy Orton versus Bray Wyatt, if they're going to be doing this whole thing mostly behind the scenes and they're going to film it earlier in that day or the night before or something like that, I don't know. I mean, that it could be cool for something different. So I'm going to try to keep my mind open, because if I've never seen it before, maybe I am just not as imaginative as I need to be able to think of something how it could be really great and whatever. But I also could see it being something where it's just way too fake, I guess is a good word for it. And you can tell that it's like the cameraman just happened to be in this right angle at the right time and that kind of stuff. And I like my wrestling to be a little bit more realistic. I like when the cameraman isn't exactly set up for a move, or when you got a backstage segment and it's sort of like, we're going to cut to somebody walking backstage and somebody attacked them. Well, you don't have somebody walking backstage on a shot when they're not getting attacked, right? Like that kind of a thing. Or when you get like the weird thing that WWE always has their announcers do, or not announcers, the interviewers, where they'll kind of like just stare at the like off into the distance when somebody walks away, and they just wait for it to cut away instead of saying back to you guys, or let's cut to something backstage 5 seconds before it happens instead of 20 seconds after it started. They don't do that kind of stuff as much as they should. So if you manufacture an entire match, it's just going to come up like you're filming something like, you're trying to make a movie out of it. And I don't really want to see a movie. I want to see a wrestling match. So whether or not they have some cool spots in it is totally up in the air, because we don't know what sort of environment they're going to be in. Whether or not this is going to be too highly stylized, I have no idea. It could be a lot of fun, or it could be one of the stupidest things we've seen in the entire year. So I am all over the place with this, and if the title's not on the line, Bray Wyatt's chances go up dramatically to win this, yet I still got to go with Randy Orton. I still think that he is the bigger story to go with here. He's the WWE champion. He needs that momentum going forward because he is the top guy on the SmackDown brand, and if he loses to somebody that's not even close to the top guy on Raw, it's going to kind of make SmackDown look a little bit weak. And Bray Wyatt is kind of a choke artist. He always comes up short. So, got to go with Randy Orton winning that one. And finally, the biggest match of the night, at least what I think they're going to be billing as the main event and stuff, is Braun Strowman versus Roman Reigns. And this one, oh man, you have two options here. One of them is dead wrong, I think. And that's the option I think that they're going to go with, which is Roman Reigns winning. I think that they did the same thing that they always do, where they set up a big monster and then they want their guy to topple the big monster. And that pisses me off, because it's one of those things where we don't need it, and we don't need it as often as we get it. Braun Strowman needs the win far more than Roman Reigns does. Roman Reigns is a multi-time world champion. He has main evented WrestleMania twice in a row. He's won the Royal Rumble. He's beaten the Royal Rumble elimination record. He is the guy responsible for taking The Undertaker out of commission and retiring him. What else do you really need Roman Reigns to do? It's not that you need him to beat Braun Strowman, because Braun Strowman is this unstoppable force, and that when Roman Reigns beats him, the fans will give a shit about Roman Reigns again, because that's not going to happen. That's sure as hell not in the cards. But then you get a guy like a Braun Strowman, who the attack with the ambulance is one of the best things he's ever done. And he got a lot of people that were going, you know what? Roman Reigns is pretty fucking awesome. He gets a win over Roman Reigns. He suddenly solidifies himself even more. He loses again to Roman Reigns. And then he's the guy who you build up to lose. And he's the jobber to the stars, essentially. Although the jobber to the star, because he's only really lost to Roman Reigns, but it's still the same basic effectiveness. So I hope, against hope, that they're smart enough to go with Braun Strowman winning here. Roman Reigns is the type of guy that you can always bet is going to win, and more than likely you're going to be right. It's the same thing with the John Cena treatment, and that sucks, because it's not the way that you should be booking a company in my mind, and we can do the whole argument back and forth about that kind of stuff, but I think I'm of the philosophy that if somebody needs a win and somebody else doesn't, you give it to the guy who needs it, as opposed to the guy who it would just be the standard status quo. Roman Reigns winning is the status quo. Roman Reigns losing, not the same case. Braun Strowman winning, that's status quo too, but not when it comes to a big match. You know, he got his whole big WrestleMania moment spoiled pretty damn early with that Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal. He never won the World Championship yet. He hasn't beaten Roman Reigns yet on a pay-per-view. So you got to go with Braun Strowman winning here. And if they don't do that and they give this to Roman Reigns, it's going to definitely leave a sour taste in my mouth, that's for sure. So as far as what I think is going to be the best match of the night out of this lineup, I think that it's going to be between either Bayley versus Alexa Bliss, or gun to my head, I'd probably say maybe Neville versus Austin Aries. Yet there is a chance that Kevin Owens and Chris Jericho, or Randy Orton and Bray Wyatt, or Braun Strowman and Roman Reigns, or Samoa Joe and Seth Rollins takes this. I think that there is a lot of potential for this card, and I am really excited to check it out. Yet there are going to be some downtime moments where I'm not going to be too into it. The tag team title match, the tag team match on the pre-show in general is just going to be a waste for me for the most part. And the thing that I'm looking forward to the least out of all that is probably the fact that they just don't have that Intercontinental Championship on the line. And that's really just weird. So maybe they figure out a way to incorporate it onto the show. I don't know. But I will nonetheless be checking it out the way that I normally do. I'll be doing my live coverage and stuff. So you guys should check that out on smarkoutmoment.com when it's going through live. We also will have our live chat on the Mega Maniacs. And then, of course, after the pay-per-view, we're going to be doing our Payback post-show review recap. So stay tuned for that kind of stuff coming up Sunday night. But I want to know what you guys have to say about the predictions for Payback. What are you looking forward to? What are you not looking forward to? Who's going to win? Who's going to lose? What's going to come out of that? And any other opinions that you got, drop them in the comments below. And make sure you hit that subscribe button and that thumbs up button as well. And follow the Facebook and Twitter accounts at SmarkOutMoment. Obviously, follow the website too for all the other kind of content that's coming your way this week. And I guess that's it. So thanks for listening, everybody. This has been another Smark Out Moment, and I'm being counted out.